Now, first up today, let's just recap as what's been going on here in the Philippines. Now, on Tuesday, security forces in Marawi in Mindanao tried to capture one of the most wanted Islamic terrorists. However, they were confronted by at least 100 militants, some of whom carried very sophisticated weapons. Now, many of these militants are part of a gang known as the Maute. These are terrorists. They have a connection, it seems, or this terrorist that they were looking for has a connection with Abu Sayyaf. The Maute organization have pledged allegiance to ISIS. The U.S. has offered $5 million for the reward of this terrorist capture as he's been trying to unite several smaller Islamist groups in the region, including the Maute. They raised their black banners over several buildings in Marawi, including the city's main hospital. They took a priest and parishioners hostage and set fire to buildings and set prisoners free. For this, President Duterte has imposed martial law over the southern island of Mindanao. Now, the Maute are part of 4 Islamic groups in the region affiliated with the Islamic State. The group, founded by the brothers Abdullah and Omar, started out with just a small band of petty criminals. Last year, members of the Maute were arrested in connection with the bombing at the night market in Davao City, the same city that President Duterte is from. The authorities also said they foiled a plot in November, if you remember, in which the group tried to bomb the United States Embassy in Manila. Mr. Duterte cut his trip short in Russia this week to oversee the military operation and declared martial law in Mindanao. On Wednesday, Mr. Duterte warned that he might impose military rule over the rest of the country, citing the possibility that terrorists could begin operations in the northern Philippines. Martial law replaces the civilian government in Mindanao with the military, so now soldiers can carry out arrests merely on suspicion of committing a crime. Now, at least 11 soldiers and 31 militants have been killed, and thousands of residents have fled from the city. One student said they were preparing for exams, and we could hear gunfire and bombs. We were sure that they were going to get us. Mindanao has been the home to several Muslim rebel groups fighting to get their own autonomy. However, there have been ongoing peace talks with the government over the years, but still some smaller groups stay active. Indonesia and Malaysia have ongoing links with these groups and go back many years. But now many are subscribing to this new Islamic State ideology. The Solicitor General said it's no longer a rebellion of Filipino citizens, but has transformed into an invasion by foreign fighters. It seems as if the Islamic State is targeting the Muslim majority parts of the southern Philippines to establish a base in Southeast Asia, as the number of Indonesians and Malaysians traveling to Mindanao has increased over the past year. Even though there seems to be a serious ISIS problem in the Philippines, there is yet to be any real concrete evidence of support for them. President Duterte said he's willing to talk to the militants, but he also has said that if this gets out of hand and he sees evidence of them in Luzon or the Visayan region, that martial law could be expanded to the rest of the country. The president has the power under the 1987 Constitution to declare martial law in cases of invasion or rebellion when the public safety requires it. It says, by rising and taking arms against the government for the purpose of removing the allegiance to that government or depriving the chief executive or the legislator of any of their powers. So how does that connect to what's going on in Mindanao? Well, by flying the flag of the Islamic State in several areas, the Maute militants have openly attempted to remove the allegiance to the Philippine government in this part of Mindanao. Duterte said he would consider military rule throughout the country if the Islamic State, if he deems that they are gaining footholds in Luzon and Visayas. But a spokesman for the military says, When we call them ISIS, we make them famous. He says we don't have ISIS in the Philippines. Another expert in Southeast Asia security says the Maute is not a difficult force for the military to handle, despite their claims of belonging to the ISIS organization. Maute is a small group that recruits from the MILF combatants. They have pledged their allegiance to ISIS. However, there's no evidence to this date that the Islamic State has given them any resources. They call it a manageable threat. Now, those who might not be familiar to the history here, Mindanao is what many Muslims regard to as their ancestral homeland. They came to the Philippines well before the Catholics, and they were very well established in the south. But the Catholics migrated into the region, and eventually the Muslims became the minority. Rebel groups formed back in the 1970s and forged a rebellion asking for their own autonomy. Now, there have been multiple peace deals forged with the rebels, the MNLF and the MILF. However, there has been little concrete implementation. It seems without the cooperation between the government security forces and these groups, the Maute group has been able to recruit and freely exist. So, what will have to happen now? The enacted martial law will last 60 days. What can happen in those 60 days? Is this terrorism or rebellion? Rebellion is a public uprising or taking of arms against the government. It's the action of overthrowing the government and depriving the president of his power. Terrorism, on the other hand, is a crime without a political purpose. For me, it's more about the ideology of the group, mostly relating it to religious beliefs. And also, besides the rebellion and the terrorism, there's also kidnapping people for ransom. The Duterte Proclamation for Martial Law says the Maute is a terror group among rebel groups. So the question is, does the Marawi attack meet the criteria for rebellion or invasion? Why would there be martial law over the entire island of Mindanao, even though the affected area is very small? Is this needed to subdue and contain the terrorism from spreading? In this proclamation, is there any distinction between what is terrorism and what is rebellion? Duterte has weighed the idea of martial law since August of last year, and he has mentioned it publicly 35 times in his presidency. Reasons he cited included illegal drugs, crime, and terrorism. There are many I have seen this past week backing up the president, saying, we need to have martial law to keep us safe and secure, and this is Duterte's best option. However, on the other side, they say it's a loophole that the president needs to strengthen hold on his power. Well, maybe it's both. If there's any kind of terror attack in a place like Cebu or Manila, now most assuredly the president is going to bring back martial law. Is there a way for Duterte to rid the country of drugs, crime, corruption, and terrorists without martial law? Or is this the only way? Will that make the Philippines more secure and safe, or more scared and fearful? Is the Philippines returning to the time of Marcos, or is the current president worried that the country will end up like other places in the world that our TV tells us about almost on a daily basis? Now, this past Monday at 6 p.m., the doors opened at the Manchester Arena in the UK, where the US pop singer Ariana Grande was about to play a sold-out concert. Many of the fans in the concerts were teenage girls, all very excited and taking lots of selfies, waiting for the show to begin. Then at around 10:30, the show finished and thousands of smiling fans began filing out of the arena. Then a huge explosion was heard by everyone. Witnesses describing being knocked from their feet by the explosion, and through the smoke, seeing dozens of young children lying on the floor. Many began to panic and ran to the exits. Police received more than 240 calls in a matter of minutes as dozens of emergency vehicles streamed into the area. Tuesday, police confirmed that 22 people are dead and around 50 people are injured due to what is being called a terrorist attack. Prime Minister Theresa May says her thoughts are with the victims and families of those affected by this terrorist attack. The chief constable immediately came out and stated that he believes that this was carried out by a suicide bomber detonating an improvised explosive device. Now, tweets have been coming out, including one from Ariana Grande, who tweeted, "From the bottom of my heart, I am so sorry." Donald Trump speaks out and calls the terrorists responsible losers. The Queen of England says the whole nation was in shock by the death and injury. Also, ISIS released a statement claiming responsibility for the attack. However, the UK intelligence officials are trying to find out if this attack really was connected to ISIS or is the work of another organization or possibly just one violent jihadist wanting to be a martyr for the cause. Police have finally confirmed the suicide bomber is a 22-year-old Salman Abedi. Who is this guy? And why target a concert that was sure to have so many children? According to his friends at school, he was a fun guy who loved football and cricket. Supposedly he was a party animal who liked to drink vodka and listen to rap music. He was also popular with the ladies and was, like many 22-year-olds, unconcerning and unremarkable. So why strap on a backpack filled with bolts and screws and explosives and kill yourself along with 22 children and adults? According to his teachers, he wasn't very bright and was a victim of bullying, who struggled to control his anger and frequently got into fights. He started hanging out with a criminal gang in his neighborhood in South Manchester, in an area known for recruiting Islamic terrorists. The most interesting thing is that his extremist tendencies were being noticed by his friends and later by community leaders and his family. They even called the counterterrorism hotline one time to express the concern over his behavior. Since the attack, the police have surmised that Abedi was part of a larger network of terrorists. It seems he used the same explosives that were used in the ISIS attacks in Paris and Brussels, and suggests a level of sophistication that means he was likely trained abroad. In total, 10 have now been arrested in different parts of the UK relating to this attack. In Libya, Abedi's younger brother and his father were held and questioned by special forces. A Libyan official has said that Abedi's brother knew of his aim to carry out the attack, but had no idea of its timing or location. It's also believed that the bomber Abedi might have received some ISIS training in Syria in the months before the attack and had spent time in Libya before transitioning through Istanbul and Dusseldorf. Since the bombing, the U.S. has released intel and photographs that have created tensions between the U.S. and England in regards to this incident. Under the multilateral agreement between the U.S., the U.K., Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, they all share intelligence. However, the U.S. unexpectedly revealed the identity of the bomber, leading to it making it more difficult for the police to hunt down his associates. And also, the New York Times released pictures of the bomb used in the attack. Prime Minister Theresa May confronted President Trump about the leaks during the meeting at NATO this past week, and saying that this kind of thing has got to stop. But besides all the investigations and politics and revelations and questions that were made on how this 22-year-old ended up where he did, it turns out that he was not just an ordinary guy who just snapped. This has been going on for a while, and his family knew something was wrong for a long time. Less than a week before the attack, Abedi had gone back to see his parents in Libya. His father took his son's passport, but then he was talked into giving it back to him. And his brother had stated that at the time Abidi was filled with thoughts of revenge for the US's attack in the Middle East. Minutes before the blast, he called his mother. The purpose of that call was to ask for forgiveness for what he was about to do. Some Coptic Christians were traveling this past Friday in a bus to a monastery called St. Samuel the Confessor. It's about 100 kilometers north of the city of Minya in Egypt. It's not so easy to reach this church. Take the Cairo-Luxor desert road for about 100 plus miles, and then you make a right turn, and for 17 miles you're on an unpaved road. So you have to drive very slowly until you finally get to the church. Friday is the day off in Egypt, so church groups take regular trips there. It's where Father Matthew of the Poor was ordained back in 1948. It's the last monastery of 35 that are in that area. Coptic Christians, which basically means Egyptian Christians, have always been tied to Egypt. They make up about 10% of Egypt's population. However, they have been persecuted for many years. The Romans, the Byzantine emperors, the Arabs, and of course the Muslims have tried to rid the country of them. And even though hundreds of thousands have left, many just simply refuse to leave. Now, if you remember back on Palm Sunday, a few weeks ago, 44 people were killed and 100 injured after a suicide bomber walked into two of their crowded churches. And in December, there was an attack on a Coptic church that killed 25 people. ISIS has claimed responsibility for those attacks. The Coptic churches and homes have been set on fire. Members of the churches have been physically attacked, and their property has been looted. All this in the country that once gave sanctuary to Jesus Christ. Anyway, a bus full of Christian pilgrims was heading up the remote desert, dusty road on its way to the monastery on a retreat for prayer. But all of a sudden the bus was stopped as 10 men dressed in military fatigues waved it to the side of the road. They claimed to be security officers and ordered all the passengers to get out of the bus. They separated the men from the women and children and instructed everyone to surrender their mobile phones. Then they told the men to recite the Shahada, which is the Islamic declaration of faith. The men said, "We cannot. We are Christians." It was then that the government opened fire. They killed at least 29 people, most of which was a single shot in the head. These accounts come from the relatives and the victims who watched the massacre, several of whom were children. By the time they killed half the people, the terrorists saw cars coming in the distance, and that is the reason why they thought that they didn't kill everyone. According to the survivors, they didn't have time to kill everyone, so they just shot people randomly and fled. The wounded were rushed to hospitals in Minya, where doctors scrambled to save their lives and deal with the anger and grief of hundreds of people searching for news about their relatives. There was no immediate claim of responsibility in this attack. However, as of today, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, ISIL group, has claimed responsibility for the attack, saying in an online statement that the attack has been carried out by one of its affiliates. They also claimed the number killed was 32, not 29, as reported by the media. The terrorists chose their targets well. They waited on the desolate road like game hunters as their prey came right to them in 2 buses and a pickup truck. No police, no military, very little chance of resistance. It was a well-planned attack. It's no secret what the Islamic State intentions are toward Christians. In a video, they released what they call their favorite prey, and have vowed to rid the world of them. In the northern part of the Sinai Peninsula, there is now no Christians, and there are basically no Jews left in the country of Egypt. But how did this happen in Egypt? How did ISIS get such a stronghold in there? Aren't they supposed to be in Syria and Iraq? The Egyptian response came just hours after the attack. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi delivered a speech from the presidential palace warning the attack on Christians will not go unanswered. Egyptian fighter jets carried out airstrikes on several militant camps inside Libya. Egypt also hits targets in Libya in 2005 after the militants beheaded 21 Coptic Christian migrants back then. The attacks on Libya are based on the idea that the gunman responsible for the latest violence could have come through Egypt's western desert. Of course, now Libya is angry, saying that the airstrikes only hit civilian areas and populated districts, and that only civilian properties like houses, farms, and vehicles have been damaged. The question is raised, can Egypt solve this problem by bombing Libya? Are the people who carried out this attack based in Libya, or are they based somewhere in Egypt? The military is saying that ISIS is not in the Philippines. Maybe they aren't. But if the Philippines allows that Maute to gain a foothold in an area predominantly populated by Muslims, could it become like Egypt, where they want to take over and rid the land of Christians? Or like the MILF, do they want their own autonomy and run their own government? Or maybe like Abu Sayyaf, just kidnapping people to collect on the ransom? And how about many younger, angry Muslims down in Mindanao, waiting for someone to listen to them? They were brought up peacefully, but end up going into a new school to learn violence and hate. How many 20-year-old Abidais are living in the Philippines just waiting for someone to give them a new direction? I've been to Mindanao many times, and I've met with many Muslims that live there, and I have to say they were the nicest, kindest people you will ever meet. I don't know if martial law is the right answer for Mindanao or the Philippines, but maybe there's no other choice. Can violence be defeated with more violence? One thing we have learned this week is that the world can be a dangerous place. From England to Egypt to right here in the Philippines. But let's hope in this next 60 days under martial law that the danger can steer clear of the Philippines and ISIS will decide not to enter into this country. And the Philippines can just continue being a beautiful and peaceful place. This is LeCain. I'm here on the Jam. It's Sunday night, May 28th, and we're going through some of the stories that are going on this week around the world and here in the Philippines.